Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service through a unique partnership with Alaska Public Media. It is Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022, and I have a lot to talk about. Looking at the nation, if you want additional weather information on top of what I provide in this broadcast, you can go to weather.gov. That's the National Weather Service's online presence. It'll bring you to a map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii to the lower left. Point and click on that map, and it'll bring up forecast and any relevant watches, warnings, or advisories for anywhere in the country. A good way to check up on what the weather is like, where family and friends live. And boy, there is just some incredible warmth in the nation's midsection in the lower 48. There are temperatures today that have been in the 70s as far north as the shoreline of Lake Superior in western upper Michigan. Ontonagon this mid-afternoon in the western UP was 76 degrees. We've seen 70s across Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, back into the plains, and where we have the warm air, breezy conditions, we have high fire danger, red flag warnings in effect for areas of the Dakotas down into southeast Colorado, western Kansas. Further west, where the cold air is settling into the northwest and areas along and west of the Rockies, we have winter weather advisories, isolated winter storm warnings in some of the mountainous areas, including the Sierra Nevada there in California. So very active pattern there out in through the western U.S., and we're going to see that unusual warmth begin to shift eastward in the days ahead next week, much above normal temperatures across much of the eastern United States. Well, here, the winter-like weather is going to continue through this week into the early weekend, especially for much of the mainland. We have winter weather advisories that are in effect now from Fairbanks down through the Alaska Range, the Sitna Valley, and Anchorage Bowl. Winter storm warning for the Klondike Highway up toward White Pass. Winter weather advisory for the Haines Highway. And then a high surf advisory for later tonight through noon Friday for the north side of the Seward Peninsula. Brisk north winds causing that elevated surf around Shishimarath. And then continued cold through Saturday across much of the mainland. But we're going to start to see warmer temperatures, a moderating trend on the west side of the state beginning on Sunday. And that'll continue at least through early next week. Looking at some of the FAA webcams this afternoon, Arctic Village had the state's low temperature this Wednesday morning of 21 below zero. They're 5 above this afternoon with areas of light snow. With the clouds and light snow, it won't be as cold come tomorrow, Thursday morning. Anvik, the snow's beginning to let up. Still breezy, cold though, 9 above. Brisk northeast to north winds pulling down that colder air through the Yukon Valley, through the west side of the state. So it's going to be very chilly, though the snows will be letting up. Nikiski there in the northwest quadrant of the Kenai Peninsula picked up very heavy snow, pushing over 20 inches in some areas. Some areas could have locally received 2 feet of snow from a heavy snow band over Cook Inlet that pushed inland last evening and continued last night in through a good portion of today. Areas around Kenai picked up over a foot as well. So very hefty system. That snow is trying to move into the Anchorage Bowl. Won't be that heavy, but nevertheless, we do have winter weather advisories in effect now for the Anchorage Bowl as well. Skagway, we're seeing the ceilings lower this afternoon in advance of that snow moving in, though Skagway itself will not see that much in the way of snowfall, if at all, because of the fact temperatures there are going to stay above freezing, but in the surrounding mountains and especially going up the Klondike Highway toward White Pass, that's where the winter storm warning is in effect, and could see as much as 5 to 10 inches of snow. There's a winter weather advisory for the Haines Highway, and 4 to 7 inches of snow is expected there in the higher elevations outside of Skagway and Haines. Now back through the southern and central interior, winter weather advisories from Fairbanks down through the Alaska Range, Healy, and then Talkeetna, and these areas are going to pick up anywhere from say 5 to as much as 11 inches of snowfall, mainly the heaviest snow amounts on the south side of the Alaska Range down through the Susitna Valley, and the Anchorage Bowl getting in on some of that action as well. Anchorage Bowl easily 3 to 4 inches, locally 6 to 8 inches could fall, especially the eastern hillside areas, and that would be what falls this Wednesday evening through Thursday morning. Back to the west, brisk north to northeast winds. North side of the Seward Peninsula, we have that high surf advisory. Shishmaref there for especially during the day tomorrow. And looking at the satellite imagery, we see one feature. This is kind of the mid-upper level low, curling there from near Bethel, coming eastward north of Dillingham on the west side of the Alaska Range. That's kind of the mid-upper level feature. We have a secondary surface low that is tracked from near Kodiak Island up along the east side of the Kenai. In addition to that, we have one batch of moisture pushing through areas of the Panhandle and Haida Gwaii, but there's another area further south of the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutians. As we go through time, here's the way things are this afternoon. The secondary low is taken over now on the east side of the Kenai. The original low is in process of weakening there on the west side of the Alaska Range, just west-northwest there of Lake Iliamna, with a cold front extending back across the central Bering. Weak low along the northwest coast, just keeping some snow showers and light snow going. And then the frontal band that'll be pushing across the Panhandle tonight, early Thursday morning. There's going to be a secondary low down over the North Pacific that's going to ride northeastward, and this feature is going to bring another round of some heavier rain to areas of the far southern Panhandle, especially Haida Gwaii into British Columbia. But we can see the low sitting up there near Prince William Sound. Later tonight, early on Thursday morning, the weak low along the northwest coast, and then Thursday afternoon, the low sitting there over the northern Gulf, and backside of it just keeps brisk north-northeast winds going on the west side of the state, pumping the cold air down in around the system. Another weak little low crossing out of eastern Russia will eventually move across the northern Bering into the southwest interior on Friday, and the next system will bring some warming temperatures. You see way out to the west, left side of the screen. That will allow the west coast to begin to see some moderating temperatures by Sunday and into Monday of next week. Otherwise, cold temperatures continue for much of the mainland interior, and eventually the Panhandle cools down as well. Thursday morning, we're looking for lows above freezing in most areas of the Panhandle, below freezing for south central, especially the interior. Thursday afternoon, 40 plus along the Panhandle, inner channels, outer coast. Back up 30, 32-ish for maybe Anchorage, but otherwise areas further north and west stay below freezing. Friday morning lows do drop off into the teens, many areas in south central, some single digits. Generally, readings should stay above freezing the outer southwestern coast there of the Panhandle. And then on Friday, still some lower 40s, say from around Sitka down through Craig and Metlakatla. Off to the west, temperatures still near 40. You get south of King Salmon, but otherwise chilly there up through south central. Interior cold, temperatures a bit above and below zero across the interior. Teens to near 20 along the water areas of Norton Sound, Kotzebue Sound. Thursday afternoon, we're looking at temperatures generally in the teens for highs in the Yukon Valley, 20s along the west coast, and readings Friday morning, single digits above and below zero common. And daytime highs on Friday still slightly better, but single digits and teens across much of the interior, Yukon Valley, and 20s again along areas of the west coast. For Thursday morning, cold readings single digits above zero there in the southwest interior, near and just a bit above freezing off the tip of the Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutians. Highs Thursday afternoon, 40-ish as you get out toward Cold Bay, Falls Pass, and into the lower 40s westward, 20s across the southwest interior. Friday morning lows, the interior again, single digits and teens. And Friday afternoon, we expect temperatures in the 20s across the southwest interior, like at Anvik, but lower 30s along the southwest coast and 40s there in through the Panhandle. And temperatures are going to moderate next week to above normal, especially the southwest and west side of the state.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Let's look at your aviation weather now. If you have a flight planned Thursday or on Friday, main weather feature, at least Thursday, will be low pressure that lingers over the northern Gulf. This feature will continue to weaken. A wave of low pressure along the lower Gulf, North Pacific interface will head toward Haida Gwaii by late in the day and also weaken, but will have a surge of precipitation, especially there through the southern portion of the Panhandle down into British Columbia. Further north, weak low off the northwestern Arctic coast near Wainwright will retrograde southwestward to just south of Point Hope by the time we get into later Friday, and then a weak low coming in through the northern Bering will head southeastward to the lower Yukon Delta as we get into Friday afternoon and early evening. Thursday morning, IFR conditions are anticipated in the interior from the Brooks Range down across areas of the Copper River Basin and in through the intercoastal mountains of the Panhandle. Thursday afternoon, we expect IFR conditions in areas up around toward Fairbanks and in through the Yukon Flats of the Alcan border. Also, lower Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait, north side of the Seward Peninsula, and then the north end of the Panhandle, whereas a fair amount of MVFR conditions linger across areas of the mainland, especially near the Alaska and Brooks Range. Friday morning, we still see some IFR conditions in the northeast interior there along the Yukon Flats. Also in the southeast, the intercoastal mountains, the north end of the Panhandle, and then with that weak low in the northern Bering, we see IFR conditions around St. Lawrence down through Nunavik Island and the areas of the west coast, especially the YK deltas. And for Friday afternoon, some improvement, still some lingering areas of IFR in the southern Panhandle, but we notice that area of IFR progressing southeastward toward Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays on in through parts of the Alaska Peninsula. And past conditions for Thursday, Anativik Pass starting out IFR giving way to MVFR. Same thing, Adigan Pass, IFR to MVFR. Lake Clark and Merrill will start out Thursday MVFR, trying to give way to VFR conditions, especially downslope flow on the east side will tend to lean toward VFR. Rainy Pass, generally MVFR conditions should persist, as well as at Windy Pass MVFR. Further east, Isabel, IFR conditions in the morning giving way to MVFR. And then Mentasta Pass, generally MVFR conditions, though as you fly south of the south entrance, you will encounter IFR conditions. And Tanita Pass, IFR conditions in the morning giving way to MVFR. And Portage Pass, kind of a split. Overall MVFR, we'll see the west entrance MVFR to VFR, but the east entrance IFR conditions early in the day giving way to MVFR. And in the far northern Panhandle, Chilkoot and White will hold on to IFR conditions throughout Thursday. Freezing levels, the surface freezing lines down there, readings above freezing across the Aleutians, lower half of the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and then immediately along the Gulf Coast in through the inner channels of the Panhandle. Otherwise, the mainland has surface temperatures below freezing. And we see a little bump there in the freezing levels rising upwards above 4,000 to 6,000 feet there, AKwx, associated with that wave of low pressure running along the lower Gulf and North Pacific interface. Greatest threat for icing Thursday will be that moisture coming in with that wave of low pressure in the lower Gulf, North Pacific, in through areas of the far southern Panhandle, Haida British Columbia, 8,000 to a flight level of 18,000 feet. And then areas of the Alaska Range around there in the interior, 2,000 to 10,000 feet, and then back toward the Chukchi Sea, some icing, isolated moderate icing, 1,000 to 6,000 feet. Strongest upper level winds, we have a jet core upwards of 150 to 165 knots from the west out over the lower Gulf down into the North Pacific. And as we drop down to 700 millibars, 9,000 feet, we see a broad area of northwesterly winds across the western areas of the mainland in through the Alaska Peninsula, and a broad belt of 50 to 75 knot winds coming ashore from the North Pacific up into British Columbia. And then finally, 3,000 feet, a couple of low pressure circulations, one there along the northwestern Arctic coast, the other along the northern Gulf Coast, and a broad area of winds coming in from the Bering Strait down across the west side of the state, out of the north-northwest, upwards of 35 to as high as 60 knots. We do have some pockets of stronger winds. Cook Inlet entrance, Kamishak Bay, and also back down toward areas downwind of Bekoroff Lake and Wide Bay could see isolated severe turbulence with areas of considerable moderate turbulence, especially in the southwest.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snyder, and joining me today is Cindy Preller. She's the Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska Region's National Weather Service. And Cindy, we hear a lot about tsunamis in the news, probably a lot more than we used to, but let's remind everybody, what is a tsunami?
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Sure.
Tsunami is basically, it's really simple. It's just a disturbance in the water column. So the entire water column from the seafloor to the sea surface is disturbed by something major, usually a major earthquake. But it can also be a volcanic eruption, even an asteroid. Landslide is especially dangerous.
Okay, so if I'm sitting in my bathtub and I drop a bath toy, that could be a bathtub tsunami.
It is absolutely a bathtub tsunami.
Okay, very good. So Alaska is one of the states, or maybe the state, with the greatest amount of coastline, so tsunamis are a pretty major risk here in Alaska. Who is most at risk?
Yeah, Alaska is significant. We actually make most of the Pacific's tsunamis.
Wow, okay.
On the Aleutian Trench. And it's where the Pacific plate is subducting underneath the American plate. And we produce some very large, great quakes, and of course the most at risk is the Aleutian Trench.
Okay.
But that extends into south central Alaska as well. They're at huge risk, and then southeast Alaska's risk is really mostly landslide focused.
Okay. Are there any places along the Alaskan coastline that don't have a tsunami risk, or at least a very, very low risk?
Absolutely. The Bering Sea's risk is very low, and the Arctic's risk is very low as well.
Okay, so when we're talking about tsunami dangers, those are places that need to be monitored, but probably not really.
No, I mean, I won't say never.
Yeah, sure.
Because I know better.
Science knows better.
Right. So
very good.
Near to never.
Okay. Well, let's just say you're on the coast anywhere in Alaska. What are warning signs that tsunami dangers are threatening you right now?
This is super important because Alaska's greatest risk, especially out on the Aleutians and South Central, is a near-field tsunami, and then of course the landslides in southeast. It's even more intense because we can't.
So shorter warning time.
No warning time.
Okay.
The earthquake is the warning.
Okay.
And that is the most important thing for anybody to remember. The water can arrive in less than 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Wow. Yeah. At the National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, we need to get the warning out in 5 minutes. So for those near-field tsunamis. It's the earthquake is the warning. So if you feel shaking, and of course the first thing you do is drop, cover, and hold, and you need to start counting slowly to 20. The right way. How do you do that? Oh, I teach kids to do it with their favorite things. So 1 chocolate, 2 chocolate, 3 chocolate, but you can count anything you like. And if you're thinking of something happy, that helps. Especially helps kids, but it'll help your psyche. So you don't speed up because you're getting stressed out. Right. It actually lowers your heart rate. Interesting. You know, so if you think of something you love and practice that. So you're in an earthquake, you're under the table, you're next to the ocean. Right. This is important if you're next to the ocean. If you're not next to the ocean, don't worry about it. Just stay in place under cover. And you're talking about a mile, a quarter mile? What's close? A mile, even a couple miles. You know, our rule of thumb used to be a mile inland was safe, but the last few tsunamis have taught us otherwise. So, yeah, you know, in Japan we had inundation up to 10 miles. So. And that was a big quake. That was a big quake. So you have a quake, you're counting slowly to 20. To 20. What's next? And if you get to 20 and it's still shaking, you need to evacuate. And that is, that's scary. Yeah. Because you're evacuating in a live event that's still shaking. You know, 1964 shook for 4.5 minutes. Indonesia shook for 12 minutes. Wow. Japan, I think, shook for 6. I'm not sure of that, but it was long. Anyway, more than 20 seconds. And that's a sign of a very major earthquake, the worst. Well, 20 seconds is a magnitude 7, so that's not the worst. But what a magnitude 7 can do is trigger a landslide. And those landslides might be a submarine landslide, so you won't see it, you won't hear it, you won't know it, and then the water's moving. So that's really, really, really dangerous. That's what happened in '64 first. Seward, Valdez, Whittier all had landslides first. And when you're talking about the water is a warning sign too. What happens with the water that gives you a very easy visual sign that something's changing? Not guaranteed. It might go out. It might go way out really fast enough to leave the fish behind. But that's not guaranteed. It might just be a fast flood instead. So either way, if it's acting like a super fast rising tide, faster than a tide should rise, get out of there. And if it goes out really fast, get out of there. You know, we lost a lot of lives because people will go check out the new tide pools or pick up fish or shells or, you know, so, and it should feel weird. You know, it should be weird. So pay attention to those natural warning signs and how you feel, because those are maybe the only clues you have. Right, and you know, sound also. You can hear a tsunami. It'll sound like a roaring train, maybe. Or it might sound silent, because the water's been pulled out.
Right.
And that's pretty weird. Imagine camping at night near the beach, and all of a sudden you don't hear the ocean anymore.
That would be different.
That would be weird. Yeah.
Okay.
And then you also might hear blowing bubbles, and that's actually from the pressure that's blowing the air out from the sand grains, rock grains. So if you hear blowing bubbles, that's a little weird.
Okay.
Or clinking rocks, like a rain stick. So those are the sound signs. So the visual is rushing in or rushing out, and roaring especially.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of work to get people and keep people aware of what the tsunami warning signs are and what their risks are around Alaska. And there's a website that can help them do that. Where can they go online to get more information for their school, their home, their church, their business?
Oh, there's several. The National Tsunami Warning Center has a website as well, and the easiest way to look that up is just NTWC.
NTWC.
The URL is not intuitive at all.
Okay.
There's also ready.alaska.gov. The state of Alaska has a lot of helpful stuff. Preparedness kits. They have everything you need to get ready.
Okay.
And then for teachers and others, there's a wonderful curriculum called Alaska Tsunami Education Program.
Alaska Tsunami Education Program. Okay.
And that's AKwx.
AKwx. Okay, very good. Those are really good tips to get more information and search that out and help your own community stay safe with the threat of tsunamis around Alaska. Next time we come back and talk to you some more about the Tsunami Ready program and get more in depth on how people can learn more about the risks and what to do here in Alaska. So thank you for joining us today, Cindy. And next time on Alaska Weather Facts, more on tsunamis around Alaska. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and let's conclude our show with the marine weather segment and looking at the sea ice edge. The ice continues to grow and expand across the Arctic coast, and as we go down along the northwest coast, we see it also increasing there from AKwx down through Point Lay, and also ice filling in Kotzebue Sound and areas of Norton Sound as well. And as we go further south down through the Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas, we see the ice building there as well, especially further south down through the Kuskokwim Bay area, and a few areas of ice beginning to show up too in Cook Inlet as well, including Turnagain Arm in there in the upper reaches, including Connect Arm. But otherwise, we expect the ice to continue to build here through into the early weekend as cold temperatures are going to be in place. But we are going to be dealing with some winds, at least in through the Panhandle. Winds on Friday, or Thursday rather, will be down a bit southeasterly, 15 to 20 knots. Still some gust up there along Lynn Canal, upwards to 35 knots. Waves 4 feet, though as high as 7-8 feet there down around Dixon Entrance. And the outer coast, look for west-southwest winds around 20 knots. Waves anywhere from 8 to 10 feet west of Craig to as much as 12, 13 feet west of Sitka and Yakutat. Otherwise, on Friday, a stronger push of winds is going to be coming into especially the southwest outer coast, 35 to 40 knot westerly gales. Waves building upwards of 20 to 25 feet. For the inner channels, winds south-southeast 20 knots, Ketchikan up through Petersburg, waves around 4 feet, but winds turning more northerly down the length of Lynn Canal at 25 knots and waves 5 feet. For the northwestern Gulf, most notably, we're going to see outflow winds there of 55 knots between the Kenai Peninsula and mainland there at the entrance of Cook Inlet, and that'll lead to waves anywhere from 12 to 17 feet. Northwest winds Prince William Sound at 30 knots, waves 6 feet, and winds generally off the Kenai northwesterly at 35 knots and 11 feet. For Friday, strongest winds continue there at the entrance of Cook Inlet and to just northeast of Kodiak, 45 to 50 knot winds and waves of 16 to 20 feet. North end of the inlet, winds will be out of the north 25 knots, waves 4 feet, and north winds in Prince William Sound at 25 knots and waves also running about 4 feet. Across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island on Thursday, winds in Shelikof Strait 40 knots, otherwise northwesterly 35 knot gales. Fairly common there on the Gulf and North Pacific side of the peninsula. In through Bristol Bay down to north of Cold Bay, we're looking at winds out of the north at 25 to 30 knots and waves 8 to 11 feet. For Friday, the strongest winds will be across Kodiak Island, 50-knot northwesterly storm force winds. Waves running 15 to 18 feet, including areas around Shelikof Strait, and especially east of Kodiak Island, and then extending down along the length of the Alaska Peninsula. Look for west-northwest gales 35 to 40 knots and waves running 9 to 12 feet on the North Pacific side and say 10 to 13 feet on the Bering side. The Aleutian chain generally across the central eastern Aleutians, look for northerly winds around 20 knots, waves 7 to 8 feet on the North Pacific side, 8 to 9 feet on the Bering side. And for Friday, winds will be out of the west at 25 knots through the eastern Aleutians, waves around 9 feet either side of the eastern Aleutians. And then as we get back out toward west of Atka and Adak, winds are going to turn more southerly, increasing 25 to even near 40-knot gales at Kiska, with waves way to the west building upwards to 20 feet west of Kiska through Shimia. And along the southwest coast, winds will be out of the west-northwest 25 to 30 knots, waves generally 7 to 9 feet, northwest winds in Norton Sound 25 knots, waves 6 feet. And for Friday, in Norton Sound, northwest winds 15 knots, waves 4 feet. Strongest winds of 30 to 35 knots will be generally around and south and west of Nunavik Island, which will create waves on the order of 8 to 12 feet. Highest there in the southeast corner of the Bering, just south of Bristol Bay. And looking at the Arctic coast, east winds 20 knots, waves 4 feet with areas of ice, winds north-northwest 25-30 knots, lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait, waves 8 to 11 feet. And then on Friday, winds will be out of the east, 20 to 25 knots across much of the northern coast, turning more north-northwesterly through the Bering Strait.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.